So my guest today is Stefanía Ólafsdóttir. Stefanía is the CEO and co-founder of Avo, a next-generation analytics governance platform helping product managers, developers, and data teams plan, track, and govern their product analytics. Prior to co-founding Avo, Stefanía studied abstract maths and statistics, and she was in charge of data science, then revenue management for Quizup, a trivia game that had over 100 million players. Stefanía, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great. So maybe you can start at the beginning. So you studied abstract maths and statistics at the university in Iceland. What initially attracted you to this universe, and what were your initial plans for your career?
Starting with the easy questions.
Yeah, always.
So I guess, to make it fully accurate, I actually studied mathematics and philosophy.
Oh, okay.
And so that's also abstract, pretty abstract. My favorite subjects when I was a kid in school were, I think, mathematics and sort of like it's, I don't know what to call it in English. It's like everything around like sentence structures and systems and grammar, in the Icelandic grammar and like in the Icelandic language. Those are my two favorite subjects. And I think that sort of speaks a little bit to my appreciation of systems and sort of wanting to understand why things are the way they are, and sort of liking when things have a system and a reason for why they are the way they are. And then when I was in high school, I guess you would call it, I ended up focusing on philosophy, and that sort of was, I guess, a little bit coincidental, because I took a philosophy course and I really liked the teacher, basically, or at least in my second philosophy course, I really loved the teacher. And the first one, I guess, I loved the thinking about everything part. And then I had decided to study philosophy, but when I was a kid, I thought I would probably study something like engineering. Okay. And my dad is an engineer as well, industrial engineer. And so there was this, everything is so coincidental. When I was, the Icelandic University does this thing called the University Day, where you can, when you're still in high school, you can go and sort of check out some booths and like learn a little bit more about what you might want to study. And I was going to check out the philosophy, booth, I guess you could call it. And Dad was like, Steph, you should check out the engineering section. Like, maybe you want to study engineering. And I was like, okay, fine, sure, I'll do that. And I walked over there and asked, like, what the hell is the difference between like industrial engineering, electrical engineering, like all of these different engineering sort of paths. And I just asked the kids there. They were studying it, and they were like, and I was just like, I wouldn't even know where to start. What type of engineering should I choose? And they really couldn't really answer the question. It was like, yeah, it's pretty similar. I don't really know. Do you know? And they were just like asking each other. So I just sort of like gave that up and was like, no, I won't study that. On my way out after that, I literally stumbled upon the mathematics booth and was like, yeah, you can study mathematics in the university. That would be interesting. And coincidentally, the person that was introducing that, he was in my same high school, okay. A couple of years ahead of me. And so he told me a little bit about it, and I ended up studying both.
Okay.
That's a coincidence.
And what was the plan then? Like, what were you thinking that your adult life was going to be?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was literally talking about this with a few people last week on a panel about sort of identity. What do you identify as and all those things? And, there are these people that have this really strong, opinions or beliefs about what they want to do, what they want to become when they grow up. And I was not one of those people. That was not a part of my identity, knowing really strongly what I wanted to focus on. So I think, from my perspective, I have always been a very curious person. And mathematics and philosophy, just studying that seemed fun,
Okay.
And that was it at that point in time. There was a lot of pull at that. When I was in university, there was a lot of pull from like the banking and the financial industry for mathematicians. They seek out mathematicians and sort of try to get them to work in banks and financial institutions and stuff like that. And I had no interest in that, just absolutely no interest in it. I have always been very fond of sort of participating in, I guess, education and knowledge sharing, and particularly sort of the upbringing of children independent of their parents. I think that's a really huge social, systems, government issue type of thing.
Yeah.
And so just, I was thinking about that type of thing. I was also considering like starting a residency / hostel type of thing in Iceland for bands that would come to Iceland and play music. Nice. So it was like pretty diverse what I was considering doing. At least it was not clearly data science. That was not what I was sort of targeting or anything like that. And so then just life is filled with coincidences and you end up doing what you're doing.
Absolutely. So I'm getting that you like the depth, you like the curiosity, and you didn't want to be in the banking industry, all that aspect didn't attract you. So what initially attracted you to Quizup? What did you know about startups or working for a startup at that point?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I finished my university studies of mathematics and philosophy, I ended up first I ended up going and traveling around Australia for half a year. That was really great.
As one do.
As one does. And then from there, when, it was a couple of months until I was going home, I was like, okay, so, I should maybe start thinking about what I should do. And I was thinking like, is there anything related to philosophy and mathematics that one does as a career? And that's a really vague thing. It's not like you study, to become a dentist and then you just become a dentist. And so what I looked towards at that point in time, just to stop there on the way to like the Quizup, why was I attracted to Quizup? I ended up looking at sort of a little bit more of the more established, quote unquote startups in Iceland that were at some point startups. They were creating something cool and new, like company for prosthetic limbs, and a company for innovation in like the food industry, and then there was this company that was innovating a lot in genetics research called Decode Genetics, and so I applied with these companies that were sort of creating something cool. And so they had then been around for, anywhere between like 10 and 15 or up to maybe 20, 30 years. So no longer a startup, but still creating something really cool. Innovation, yeah, definitely. That sort of attracted me a little bit. And I got these job offers from these companies and ended up going into the genetics industry, or like joining Decode Genetics as a research associate. And so I joined the statistics department there. And I was working with huge data sets within Decode, managing a lot of data engineering type of things that wasn't really called data engineering then. It was like, doing distributed computing, but I was also helping doctors and biologists making sense of the data to find correlations between DNA and physical DNA mutations and physical traits. And so I'd been working with huge data sets and learning a lot there. I learned how to program at Decode, although I would probably never qualify as a software engineer, but I learned what I needed to do my job there. got introduced to like Python and R and C++ and Bash and like, managing all sorts of stuff like that. And that's when a mobile game called Quizup blew up and reached 1 million users in their first 5 days, which was the fastest growing app in the App Store at that time. And there was a record that was held for a while until another mobile game called Flappy Bird, which, I'm sure some folks that are listening remember that as well. They later beat that record. But so I knew some of the people at Quizup, just personally, and they were a friendly bunch of people. So I had been just hanging out with them, grabbing beers and stuff like that, just as friends. And then they were looking for someone to join as the first analyst to make sense of where are these million people coming from? Why are they coming? How is this growing so fast? Why are some of the people coming again and again and again, and why do some of them not return? And what's the difference between their experience or their traits? And it was so interesting because Quizup created a lot of value for its users. So it was a mobile trivia game where people would compete in, we had like thousands of topics or categories of quizzes, anywhere from like general knowledge to like the Pokemons, or like a specific, identify the flag, something really specific like that. And there were growing communities within all of those, like people really bonded over like being obsessed over knowledge like that. And so when they asked me to join, I immediately identified like there are huge opportunities to both the data set behind this is really exciting. We can do a lot of cool data sciencey stuff with all of this data, like build recommendation algorithms and stuff like that. But also, I just already realized then, how big of an opportunity this was in just like building something from scratch, building, an analytics team or a data team from scratch. And I thought that was a really exciting challenge that I felt like was just a fun next move. And like a quick side story into that, like before I actually joined Quizup, this was like late 2013 or something like that. Mid 2013, I had actually started a sort of a PhD track. So I dropped that. I dropped out of that to join Quizup, and I was just like, that PhD can wait. I'm ready to build something really cool. This is a rocket ship, and I want to join. I don't want to miss this opportunity. So I think like the people behind Quizup and the opportunities for me to build a team, and the opportunities to me to do something really cool with the data and work with really great people. I think all of those things sort of made it compelling for me.
Okay. So the rocket ship is taking off. There's already millions of users. So what are some of the challenges that you face or your team faced at Quizup when it was blowing up internationally initially?
Great question. I think, for all, obviously there are a lot of challenges in just building the right things. You all of a sudden you have something that just blows up like that, and then the next step is like, okay, can we help it continue to blow up and ensure the product market fit? That's of course like an important one. And then it's like, how do we monetize this? How do we make this a sustainable company? And then I think like the third pillar for both of these first two pillars to work is like, how do we build a team and scale the team to make sure we can, find these things, find the product market fit, and find the revenue model and make this a sustainable company. And so I think the challenges very early in a company like that goes through this kind of a rapid scaling in user base, it typically means you have to also scale up the team behind it. We had, like I was talking about, we had like 2,000 or thousands of categories and just growing endlessly. But when I joined, I think it was somewhere around 2,000 of topics. So behind that was a huge editorial team as well. Okay. So there were a lot of challenges in like just maintaining fresh content as well. So I think, but to sum it up, like, you know, some of the first challenges of building something like this is making sure you hire the right people to do the right jobs and focus on the right things. And that's a huge challenge, especially when things grow this fast, to keep everyone aligned.
And from the data side, like as the data kept coming, the data set kept growing, you had to kind of scale the way you learn from customers or scale the way you guys were able to collaborate on new features. What were some of the challenges that came up on that front?
That's a great question. So the data team journey is really interesting and maps very much onto what I'm doing today. Today, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Avo, and what you mentioned is an analytics governance platform. And it's built for product organizations, for product managers and data scientists and product engineers to collaborate and make sure we're measuring the product releases accurately and able to leverage that data to make decisions. And that is very much based on the data team learnings over at Quizup. So we started off as a data team of one, that was me. And then, you know, the problem basically from there was we needed to answer more questions faster. You know, everyone is trying to make decisions on their day-to-day job, like what to build next, what topic to release next. Just how did this feature, you know, roll out? What's the success of that? Should we focus any more on that? Like, do we have any product innovation opportunities here? Is there anything hidden in the product that like indicates that if we focus on this area, then, you know, X, Y, Z. And so identifying all of those opportunities was a lot of work because we didn't have all of the data we needed, first of all. But even for the data that we had, it was pretty disjointed. And so I was, as a data team of one, I spent my time just hacking together a bunch of data sets from, like, we had Mixpanel, we had the operational database data that literally runs the app. We had like Flurry, we had Google Analytics, we had the App Store analytics, and just all of those different data sets. It was a lot of work to just pull the data together so that people, anyone could make any decision from it. So, and it could only be done by someone who could hack together data sets. So you had to have some engineering capabilities, definitely. And so to combat that, we hired more data people first and sort of scaled the data team a little bit. But it still just kept growing as a problem. We still weren't answering questions fast enough. And so the next step in the journey, sort of stage 2, from sort of like a centralized data team that is able to answer questions, is to unblock that bottleneck. The bottleneck is like, you know, decision making is bottlenecked by the human throughput of a data scientist being able to hack together data sets and answer questions. And so we started to move further towards what is often called self-serve analytics. And that means it's a hot topic, and a lot of people just don't believe in it as a concept. Okay. But I am a strong proponent of it, but it has its caveats. We still need analysts to like that obsess over, you know, the legitimacy of results and things like that. But self-serve analytics in its core means that people can look up the data they need for their day-to-day job as they need it, some of the KPIs for their teams and things like that, and are able to sort of evaluate the success of a release or the success of a campaign or something like that.
Content. Yeah.
They might have to get an analyst or an expert, data expert, to sort of jump in to validate their assumptions or sort of look into whether the data is correct, just confirm and all those things. But the goal is to help people be able to be a little bit more self-sustainable in answering these questions, at least the early indicators of the results or the answers, and then sort of go to an expert to look into, like, what are some of the follow-up questions we need to ask before we can actually make this assumption and things like that. But the challenge there, even when we were at the stage 2 self-serve analytics stage, we still had a major challenge around data quality. So the bottleneck was like decision making was bottlenecked by lack of data quality and lack of data literacy, I would say. And so we entered stage 3, where we created analytics governance. So the data experts would support the product teams in making sure they were tracking the right metrics for the releases and structuring the data correctly and logging everything correctly that they needed to log to be able to look into the metrics. And then we basically created another bottleneck in stage 3, which is product releases were bottlenecked by analytics governance. So, for every single product release we were releasing, the product teams had to go through the data team and get confirmation that they would have the right metrics and all those things. And then sort of the 4th stage was really something closer to like a self-serve analytics governance to support self-serve analytics. And over these 3-4 years of the Quizup years, we built all of these tools and processes to enable self-serve analytics and enable self-serve analytics governance. And all of those tools took a lot of effort to build internally. And so, but it was a dream state to be in at the end, like towards that end, before Quizup was then acquired. So yeah, long, strong journey of challenges.
So do you remember the first time where you had the idea of there should be a product there, like there could be a product in this opportunity and the work that we're doing, like there should be something in this that could become a startup?
That's a great question. So from our perspective, what we did is like we wanted to optimize this problem from the data quality perspective, but also from the product developer perspective, because ultimately it's the product developers that have to write code to implement analytics events to send them into the database so that the product team is able to answer the questions that they need. And we thought about it, I think like this was super, super early product analytics. Like we were early adopters for product analytics. Web analytics has been around for a while, but like all of this changed into like the mobile analytics space and changed from like page views into analytics events. That was a huge shift that was going on. And like at that point, there weren't even a lot of resources online about like, how do you define retention and how do you define like conversion funnels and how do you measure things successfully? So I think we were that early in that journey that I think, from my perspective, at least, my first thought was not Googling a product for how to solve it, like what products exist. But our perspective was definitely like we need to bring the stakeholders together that have this problem and figure out what is the solution for it. And so I think like immediately there, when we started developing these products internally, data products, basically, I think that was that trigger, even though at that point we didn't necessarily see it as product development, but effectively we were doing internal product development of internal tools.
So later, so when you left Quizup, like what convinced you that this was an opportunity worth pursuing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So like side note, when I left Quizup, I mean, this was like a huge learning opportunity, and I learned so much from this journey. But it was also like so many journeys where you learn a lot. It was also a lot of challenges. So it was challenging as well, which is exactly what the best learning opportunities are. And I was sort of burnt out from the data space after this. I was like, we had, there was a company that acquired Quizup, and they offered me a job as the data scientist there.
Okay.
And a lot of folks were reaching out also to, ask me to join as a data scientist or a data leader somewhere. And that was a fun time to explore those opportunities. But ultimately, I just really felt like deep inside, I was like, no, I'm not doing anything more in the data space. Like that was my feeling after this. it's just such a mess. And I just envisioned that every time I would have to join a company, or every time I would join a team in doing this, we would have to just solve all of these challenges again and again and again. And so I was originally just like, or at first I was just like, yeah, I'm not doing more data. Then I started a company with a couple of friends from Quizup, and that was not Avo. It was the predecessor of Avo, or like not related to Avo at all. It was gamified micro learning for employees. So it was a B2B SaaS. And the thing there was, it only took us like 5 months. It was in our 5th month that we shipped a product update to our customers that was based on incorrect data. And it was so painful to do it. And furthermore, it was so painful to realize that like this would just continue to happen as long as I am a part of any product development team anywhere in the world. And I think that was the seed for like, okay, it can, what are people doing to solve this? Like, not everyone is building all these tools internally. Could that be? And so that was sort of what was going through our minds. So
the problem was following you.
The problem was following me. And it was just so painful. And so fast forward a few more months of building that product and that company. And we went through like a realization that, that gamified microlearning for employees, that wasn't necessarily our passion. We were doing it more of like as a business opportunity type of thing, which is a great reason to do things. But we also had the understanding that like, when you're building a startup, you're in it for, you might be in it for like 10 years. And so you want it to be something that you're passionate about. And so we learned a lot about that sort of on that journey. And with having gone through this again as well, with like all of the data quality issues and realizing like we don't have the resources to build all these tools again internally, that sort of triggered us to start talking to like hundreds of our colleagues in the data space and understanding like what are people doing to solve this. And ultimately our learnings was like, some of the biggest organizations like Spotify and Airbnb and Twitch and people like that, they had built internal tools for this, but the others were really just scrambling. And I think that was that learning with our passion for really solving this problem was sort of enough to push us into like, okay, let's build the solution to this problem.
So you knew there was a problem. You knew you had solved it, or your team had solved it at Quizup, but you also knew that other companies had found ways to solve it. So between all this, there should be a way to be able to apply a solution to different organizations.
Yes, exactly.
So what convinced, say, the first company that decided to adopt Avo to sign on?
I think it's a classic tale of your network. I think, as a B2B founder or as any type of founder, your first job is just to find people that will use or try your product and ideally pay for it at some point. And so the first thing is to just, keep hacking away at your network until you find people. And some of the first users of Avo were the people that worked with us at Quizup, right? They were used to having a solution like that in place at a previous workplace, and now they had all gone on to other workplaces, and it was a pain. And so they were like, oh, "You're solving this? Take my money." So that was a good initial step, going to the people that had seen a solution to this executed well before and seeing us that had already executed the solution before do that for them again. Yeah, there's trust. And then it's about just, continuing with the customer discovery journey, right? It's, we already had we talked to a lot of people before we decided to go into this. And so we just kept on talking to those. And like in some cases, they had already had like all of these investments internally. So they're not going to rip and replace that. But we learned a lot from those conversations, and they could point us in the next direction and the next direction and the next direction. So it's just crunch away,
So how wide was the gap between the initial vision and what your team was selling initially? Like, how did your team go about bridging that gap?
So when we started Avo, we were very clear on wanting to build a very customer first organization. And we were also really clear that we wanted to build with our customers and sort of not fall into the trap that, so often is preached. I mean, particularly with like lean. The lean concept is, don't just build somewhere in a hole and then release it and hope they come or something, but actually learn rapidly from whoever you're building for and building with. And so we took that very seriously. And so I was talking about like in the previous question, I was talking about how we got our first customers.
Yeah.
And we got our first customers to try out Avo when, it was just like it was such a hack job.
Okay. But there was a product, but it was not up to par, up to anywhere where you guys were hoping it was.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely not. Like we were just, we had people using the product. I mean, what do they say? Like if you are not ashamed of your product when you're releasing it for the first time, you're releasing too late. And we definitely followed that religiously. So we had people using Avo very early on.
Okay.
And we had a large vision for what we wanted to solve, right? We really wanted to sort of help companies build reliable data. And reliable doesn't only mean just data quality is there. It also means that it has to be relevant data. And so a lot of that vision doesn't only include data reliability and sort of confirming that the data structures actually work as expected. It also includes a lot of sort of helping people design good data. And helping people decide what they should actually measure and track. And so our sort of step by step was, okay, we want to help people design good data. We want to help people measure the right things and sort of be thoughtful in how they are strategizing their product and are able to use data to drive that vision. And for that, we have to help people design good data. And so, but what we also knew was that, even if people, decide good data that they want to measure, it won't mean anything if it's not reliable, if the data isn't just correct, if the data is broken all the time. And so we started off really raw with like, the first thing we released was about data design. And then we realized, okay, no, the first thing we have to solve is the foundation of the data quality. And so we started off with like data quality, and like it was only for data quality purposes and sort of making sure the implementation of the tracking code was correct. And like that, we're still working towards like a large vision of where we want to be. There's so much still to be done for like reaching that goal, even though we're already solving so many problems for our customers already today. And so our ultimate drive and like our strategy for this is, okay, we have a vision for where we want to get our customers, but everything that we release to them in an iterative way has to also solve a specific problem along the way. And so that's how we sort of gradually built that up.
So maybe that ties into the next question. So how does a company that works in the analytics space learn from its customers? And maybe how does that differ. You worked in crazy B2C, super fast scaling, and now you're in a bit of a different context where I'm assuming there's not 100 million people using the platform. So how does that also change the way you approach learning from your customers?
That's a great question. I think when you are drowning in data, it's easier to use quantitative data to discover when you want to dive into qualitative. I think from my perspective, it's really important to mix those two, qualitative and quantitative. Quantitative meaning, you gather a bunch of data points and then you look at charts and sort of you measure conversion funnels and retentions and things like that. And you segment it and do like, you create cohorts of people that, a group of people that joined on the same week, a group of people that joined on the same week and tried, a specific topic that week, or a group of people that joined on a specific week and won their first game or something like that. So you create all of these cohorts when you're doing quantitative analyses. And then qualitative, you have to talk to people. You both use things like user interviews and send out surveys. And things like that. And we actively do both of those things at Avo and have for the entirety of the time. Obviously, the first versions is a very qualitative thing. So we would just use every opportunity that we had to sit with people as they were using the product. We would also try to have a really clear open communication channel with our customers. So they could be reporting on Slack or somewhere anytime they were hitting questions or blockers or things like that. And that's really stayed with the team. So I think most of our customers talk about like the Avo team is, we care about them and we're a responsive team. So if you give us feedback, we take that feedback in and we try to act on it. So I think qualitative is really important, but we also measure our quantitative success results and use them to identify opportunities to ask questions, for example. And then vice versa. We talk to our customers a lot and then use that opportunity to confirm whether that's a pattern using quantitative data.
Okay. So you had experienced the pains and had done a lot of the work to solve the challenges that Avo is addressing today when you were at Quizup. So do you feel that an entrepreneur without that expertise, those experience, could have identified a similar opportunity? Like, what were the advantages of having had those experiences yourself, having experienced the pain and having been in those situations?
Yeah, this is a great question. So I think maybe two layered. I mean, obviously, having been a data scientist and like running a data team, it gives a perspective on how you can use data for product strategy. So that's, that was a part of my experience that I could bring into the toolbox of building Avo. But I think sort of what you're ultimately asking here, I think, is like, is it important to have walked in your customer's shoes when you're building a solution for them? And like, how valuable is it to have experienced the pain point that you're actually solving? And I think that is very helpful. So if you have not already done that when you're building a product, you need to make sure it's a really strong part of your culture, that you're constantly walking in your customer's shoes. So for example, there is one of our customers they're building like they're very early in building tools for Dungeons and Dragons game masters. So it's really niche and really specific. And obviously you don't necessarily have a huge selection of product managers and software developers that have experience with that. So what they do is like every Friday they play Dungeons and Dragons, right? And they experience the pain points that they're trying to solve. I think this is a classic thing. I just stumbled upon like a post from, and I think he talks about this all the time, Justin Khan, the founder of Twitch TV.
Yes.
He talked about like, the first product that he and Michael Seipel and the crew behind Twitch, what they first built really early was like a calendar app. They did that before they did Justin TV, that later turned into Twitch TV and all that stuff. And what he has talked about and identified, and I relate heavily to, is like, they were college students and calendar management was not a huge pain point for them. Like all they had to know is like, when's my next class or something. while being like a CEO or a part of a big team or something like that, or managing, like, there are multiple uses for calendar management, but they weren't maybe power users of those problems. They didn't have those problems. And they've talked about like that held them back. So to stitch it back to your question, I think, like, yes, ultimately that helped a lot, and allowed us as a team to have deep insights into the actual pains that our customers have. But I think it's also really important, and I think it can be a trap that people fall into. It's just like, yes, it's great to be able to solve your own problem, but you still really need to listen to your customers.
Yes. I think interestingly enough with Justin Can is that they kind of stumbled to the same challenge afterwards at their legal company a little later.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe as a last question, so how would you advise a new entrepreneur to think about business opportunities? What should she be looking for? It's a very broad question, but
yeah. Okay, so we're thinking before people become founders.
Yes, if you're taking back, say, when you had left the company that had acquired Quizup, for example, or someone else that you know.
Yeah. I think it is very helpful to be close to the problem that you are attempting to solve. So identifying problems to solve for people, it helps a lot if you have some experience with that problem, or have at least been pretty close to someone who has had that experience. And ultimately, like, I like the perspective that, if you can't get 30 meetings from people that should have your problem, the problem that you want to solve, where you want to talk about the problem and sort of get them excited about solving it and things like that, then you don't have a problem to solve.
Okay. So you're not talking to them about the right thing. Okay, great. That's great advice.
Yeah, or like, if you can't find at least 30 people to talk about the problem with, then you probably won't have a market to sell to.
Yeah. Oh, it's a bad start, let's say.
Yeah, exactly.
So thanks for taking the time, Stefanía. Where can people go to learn more about Avo and your work as well?
Yeah, great question. You can go to avo.app to learn more about Avo. I also host a podcast called The Right Track, where I interview data leaders, or just leaders in data engineering and product, about building data cultures. That's really fun. That's ultimately a lot, of what my passion lies is, yes, we're building a tool to solve this, but it's a mix of, culture and tooling as well, like most things are in building a team. And so that's something that I'm really interested in. And so you can go to therighttrack.avo.app to learn more about that as well.
Lots of great guests. I will link that with the interview. Thank you very much for doing this.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.